Okay, 1 Chronicles chapter 13. We began this morning to look at some folks who God killed. And we're going to be doing that again tonight. Don't want you to freak out at that. And I can almost hear guests thinking now, or those who brought guests, wondering why you brought your guests to a message on people God has killed. The guest might be saying, is this guy got a problem speaking on a subject like that? And I trust by the end you understand that I don't have a problem, and that there are verses and chapters and sections in the Bible that we need to look at, and actually from seeing God's judgment we will end up understanding God's mercy. What has interested me is questions that I've had, struggles that I've had as I have read sections like this, trying to reconcile what seems to be a difference between the God of the Old Testament and the God of the New Testament. What can be confusing as we see God wasting people and wasting multitudes in the Old Testament, and then we turn to the New Testament and read that God is love. Back to the Old Testament to see God wiping out still more people. On to the New Testament as Jesus exhorts us to turn the other cheek. Back to the Old Testament as God is still wiping out individuals, women, children, men, seemingly innocent people. Back to the New Testament to again discover God is a God of mercy and grace. It can be confusing. It has been confusing for me. And I trust that what we share will help you to come out of that confusion, but not only to come out of that confusion, to grow in your appreciation not only of God's holiness, but of God's mercy. I don't believe you can understand God's mercy until you understand His holiness, because it is a holy mercy. I don't believe you can understand God's grace until you understand His holiness, because it's a holy grace. So we want to look at another section of Scripture, and I want to read with you starting at verse 1 of 1 Chronicles chapter 13 as we cover this incident. David conferred with each of his officers, the commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds. He then said to the whole assembly of Israel, "If it seems good to you, and if it is the will of the Lord our God, let us send word far and wide to the rest of our brothers throughout the territories of Israel, and also to the priests and Levites who are with them in their towns and pasture lands, to come and join us. Let us bring the ark of our God back to us, for we did not inquire of it during the reign of Saul." The whole assembly agreed to do this because it seemed right to all the people. So David assembled all the Israelites from the Shihor River in Egypt to Lebo Hamath to bring the ark of God from Kiriath Jearim. David and all the Israelites with him went to Bela of Judah to bring up from there the ark of God, the Lord, who is enthroned between the cherubim, the ark that is called by the name. They moved the ark of God from Abinadab's house on a new cart, with Uzzah and Ahio guiding it. David and all the Israelites were celebrating with all their might before God with songs and with harps, lyres, tambourines, cymbals, and trumpets. When they came to the threshing floor of Kidon, Uzzah reached out his hand to steady the ark because the oxen stumbled. The Lord's anger burned against Uzzah, and he struck him down because he had put his hand on the ark. So he died there before God. Then David was angry because the Lord's wrath had broken out against Uzzah. And to this day, the place is called Perez Uzzah. David was afraid of God that day. I would have been too. And asked, "How can I ever bring the ark of God to me?" Now what you're going to find out later is that's a question he should have asked earlier. He did not take the ark to be with him in the city of David. Instead, he took it aside to the house of Obed-Edom, the Gittite. The ark of God remained with the family of Obed-Edom in his house for 3 months, and the Lord blessed his household and everything he had. Quite a section of Scripture. I can remember years ago reading this and not understanding. God as a result of this section of Scripture. And I hope that what I share tonight will help you to understand God. Now, I need to give you some background, so please bear with me, appreciate this. It will help you to understand what we're talking about here. 1st and 2nd Chronicles cover the same period of Jewish history described in 2 Samuel through 2 Kings. But Chronicles brings a different perspective. When you're talking about 2 Samuel to 2 Kings, you're talking about really the political history of the nation of Israel. But when you get into Chronicles, you are talking about a different perspective. Chronicles brings us the spiritual perspective on the historical events that took place in the nation of Israel. And Chronicles is also dedicated a great deal to the life of David. Now, if you turn back with me to chapter 10, let's just look at a verse concerning the death of Saul, because this is important when it comes to the Ark of the Covenant, which is a central focus of what we want to talk about. Verse 13 of chapter 10 says this: Saul died because he was unfaithful to the Lord. He did not keep the word of the Lord, and even consulted a medium for guidance, and did not inquire of the Lord. So the Lord put him to death and turned the kingdom over to David, the son of Jesse. When Saul was reigning as king, he did not show interest in the Ark of the Covenant, and that revealed where the man was at spiritually. And so what we have is, after the death of Saul, David, who reigned for 7 years as king over Judah, was then crowned king over all Israel. And we pick up David in chapter 11 through, I think it's chapter 29. It speaks about his 33-year reign over all of Israel. And when you read through Chronicles and its emphasis on the life of David, you'll find two things clearly emerge. One was his commitment to see the Ark of the Covenant returned, and number two was his desire to build a temple and a house for God. David wanted to see Jerusalem established as the city of God, a light to the entire earth, and he was committed to that as king over all Israel. And you find him immediately taken up with the Ark of the Covenant. Now, let me just talk a little bit about what the Ark was, and I hope you can picture this. I wish I had a picture of it to show you. But the Ark, which I read in one commentary, I think this is accurate, was called Israel's greatest treasure. And once you understand what it was talking about, what it symbolized, what happened around the Ark, you'll understand why. And when we're talking about the Ark, also understand that Israel's enemies had captured the Ark, although right now, when David is going to get the Ark and bring it back, it was in safekeeping. But the Ark of the Covenant was intended to rest in the Holy of Holies, the innermost room in the tabernacle. It was a wooden chest which had in it stone tablets on which God had written the 10 Commandments. It had a measure of the manna which God had fed to his people. It had Aaron's rod and staff which budded. The cover of the Ark was significant because it was overlaid with gold. It was decorated with 2 golden angels or cherubim. Their wings overshadowed the cover. And it was on the cover of this Ark once a year on the Day of Atonement. The high priest sprinkled the sacrificial blood. And that's what atonement was all about. It's called the mercy seat. And the holy God met with his sinful people once a year at this place. So when you talked about the Ark of God to the nation of Israel, you are talking about the very focus of the presence of God. The Ark symbolized a holy God meeting with a sinful people on the basis of grace on the ground of atonement. Israel's most treasured possession. As David is the king over Israel, the first thing he wants to do is to go and bring the Ark back. So it's a time of great anticipation and great celebration. The Ark is going to be restored to the place of prominence that God wants in the midst of the nation. After the reign of Saul, now the glory of God is going to be returning to the nation of Israel. So we are talking celebration. And if you have ever been to a Jewish wedding, Jewish people know how to celebrate. All right? I mean, have you ever been to a Jewish wedding? Do you know what I'm talking about? Listen, we are white middle-class folks. I want you to know we do not know how to celebrate. We need to take lessons from Jewish people. And so when I read this, I think, celebration is not a word. I mean, we go to weddings at times, welcome to celebration, and nobody's talking and everybody's quiet, and religious tone of voice abounds, and we talk about it as a celebration. You sure could fool somebody who knows what a celebration is all about. These people were serious about celebrating. If you've been to a Jewish wedding, often it'll be accompanied by dance, and they dance in groups and things like that. And these are not things that we are used to doing. And we need to get used to doing because it's part of our heritage. God is a celebrating God. And check out what's happening here when we talk about celebrating. If you look down with me at verse 8, David and all the Israelites were celebrating with all their might before God. I'd say that's serious celebrating, wouldn't you? We're talking celebrating, folks, with all their might before God's instruments. They're singing, they're dancing, and it's interesting. 30,000 men were participating in this particular celebration. And if you read earlier, have you ever read about David's mighty men? Folks, we are talking about some bad dudes. One of the David's mighty men, it's told earlier in the Bible, he was walking by a pit one day. It was a snowy day, and a lion was in the pit, and he just decided to just go in the pit and kill the lion. That's the kind of guys David had as his mighty men. Day off, why not? I mean, this is what these guys got off on. It was stimulating, and snowy pit, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't exactly speak to me of sure footing, and I wouldn't have been motivated to take on a lion one-on-one, but he probably hadn't killed a lion in the last week, and there was something moving in him to want to do it. Read about those guys earlier. You have to understand that these were not effeminate individuals. They were celebrating, but they were celebrating, and they were masculine men. And when you picture 30,000 of these guys celebrating with all their might, and David wasn't off to the side viewing it as if it was beneath him. David was leading the whole situation. I can just see him in the midst of it with his harp playing away, jumping as high as he could, dancing with all his might. It's a time of national celebration. The ark is going to be returned and restored to the place of prominence that God wants it to have and that God deserves. So they're celebrating. There's a spirit of celebration, instruments, songs, and they walking along, they're celebrating and dancing. The ark is on an ox cart, and suddenly the oxen for some reason stumble, and something in the road, who knows, but the oxen stumble, and Uzzah, who happens to be next to the ark at that moment, does what I believe was just a reflex action. The oxen stumble, the ark begins to fall off the oxen, this beautiful gold, this most treasured piece in all of the nation of Israel is going to hit the dirt, an unthinkable action, and Uzzah, with reflex action, puts out his hand to keep the ark from following. Now, as you read this, in the midst of this celebration, 30,000 men celebrating, dancing, singing before the Lord, the oxen stumbles, the ark begins to just fall off. Uzzah does what I would have done, what you would have done, tried to steady the ark. You would have thought God would have said, "Thanks, Uzzah." Would you not? I do when I read that. And I want to insert a line. And then the Lord said, "Thanks, Uzzah." God doesn't say thanks. God kills him. God kills him immediately. God executes the dude. Anybody here besides me ever struggle with that? Everybody is celebrating with all their might. And God wastes Uzzah immediately for doing what I believe anybody would have done. I mean, have you ever been in a situation where it's a reflex action? You've been sitting at a table eating a meal, and the plate gets moved and something falls. I mean, you do it. You don't think about it. You don't stand and say, "The plate is falling on my lap right now. Food is going to be distributed over my clothing. What should I do? I believe I'll put my hands here." No, that's not. Somebody bumps in, and you do that. Uzzah's walking along, celebrating. The oxen stumble. The thing goes off. There's no time to think. It certainly doesn't seem like a crime punishable by capital offense. Talk about raining on a parade. I mean, God, where is your understanding? Here you have a multitude of your mightiest men. God, why aren't you celebrating after the reign of Saul? God, you've just had to put up with Saul for all those years. And now we've got David and his men. We've got all of Jerusalem waiting for them to return. Can you imagine what the festivities were going to be when they got back if these were the festivities that were taking place along the way? And yet God, in the midst of that, doesn't hesitate. He executes Uzzah. Now, folks, I don't know about you, there's something in me which says, okay, God, you killed this guy simply because he put his hand on the ark? I say, Lord, I do need a little further explanation. Lord, it seems to me that your word says in numerous places that you are slow to anger. Could we please have your definition of slow? I mean, I don't have in the margin of my Bible slow to anger. I just say, you are slow to anger. You killed this guy immediately. What was he supposed to do? That's my question. If you know anything about David's mighty men, what would you do? Would you let the ark hit the ground and have one of those dudes come up and inquire, who let it fall off the ark? Who let it fall off the ox cart? Thing is totally dirty now. Who was the idiot who let the thing fall off the ox cart? Why is that? Because I'm going to break his head. That's why. I mean, that's an intimidating group around you celebrating. They're dancing now, but don't be deceived. That guy over there just broke a lion's head open last week. I don't know I mean, that's what I do when I read this. I say, God, what do you expect him to do? I don't believe the guy had any choice, it seems to me. Just a reflex action. He reached his hand out and he just touched it and you killed him. I struggle with that. David struggled too. I'm encouraged. The Bible says David was angry in verse 11 because the Lord's wrath had broken out against Uzzah. David was angry. Have you ever been angry at the Lord? I have been angry at the Lord. I grow less angry as the years go by, because the more I understand His holiness, the more I realize there is no room for my anger against God. I love verse 12 too. And David was afraid. I guess so. I would have been petrified. I mean, I would have hit the dirt. Can you imagine the scene? How everything must have stopped. Can you imagine as the word moved through the ranks of these thousands celebrating that Uzzah was killed instantly by God? Can you imagine people just turning around? Uzzah just died. You know, guys celebrating. Hey, what? Uzzah just died. He died. For what? Well, the ox cart stumbled and he touched it. When he touched it, he died. Say what? Well, the ark was falling off and Uzzah touched it. And when his hand touched it, God killed him. You mean he kept it from falling in the dirt? Yes. And God killed him for that. That's right. Where is the ark now? It's over that way. I'm going this way. See, I mean, that would be I'm getting away from here very quickly. You imagine, talk about celebration to depression in a moment's time. David was angry. David was afraid. I believe David was shocked. And this amazes me. David decided not to take the ark with him that day. I felt that was wisdom. What I can't believe is that he was able to leave it at this dude Obed-Edom's house. Now, I would like to know how he got away with that, all right? I don't know if Obed-Edom has a full bag of groceries. I'm not sure. They might... I mean, try to picture this. A knock comes at Obed-Edom's door. And Obed-Edom comes to the door, and there's about 30,000 guys in his front yard. And again, we're talking about David's mighty men, folks. So we're talking about some bad dudes. And David's there at the front door. Hello, how are you? Your name? Obed-Edom. Obed, Some of my friends and I were just walking by, well, let's see. We got this thing here, and we're just wondering. We're wondering if we could store it somewhere in your house. We're gonna come back. We're a little tired, and we're gonna do this another day. We eventually want to get it to Jerusalem. Obed says, "Who's the dude over there in that guy's arms?" Well, that was Uzzah. What did he do? You don't want to know. Well, let me see it. Let me see it. I wouldn't touch it. I wouldn't touch it. I'd encourage you not to touch it. Well, why is that? Well, you see Uzzah over there? I mean, how did this happen? I mean, sure, put it around the side. I don't know. We're not given a whole lot of background about Obed-Edom. So all we know is that when they left it there for 3 months, it says the Lord blessed his house and everything he had. Now, folks, that only gets more confusing to me. Why is Uzzah killed, and on the way home they drop it off at Obed's house, and Big O is blessed for 3 months? Anybody else confused by this? I mean, there's something... Think about what it must have been like as these guys all returned, and the city of Jerusalem, the people of God, are watching from a distance as these thousands begin to come into sight. And I'm sure they noticed right off the bat that there was a distinct lack of celebration. And I'm sure as they grew closer, they wondered who that was being carried. And as they returned to try to explain why Uzzah died, do you think anybody was confused? Can you see anybody in Uzzah's family saying, "What did he do?" And David said, "Well, the oxen stumbled, the ark started to fall, and what he did was he touched it to keep it from falling in the dirt." Do you think there were some people who were angry and confused as well as afraid? I think so. Because it seems like the severity of Uzzah's fate is too great for the offense that he committed. And let me just say, this is what I've learned. That the reason I don't understand Uzzah's fate is because I don't understand God's holiness. That's why. That's what I've discovered. If you are offended by God's wrath here, I don't say this to be critical of you. I just say this to help you. If you are offended by God's wrath here, and I have been, then you don't understand God's holiness or our sin. Because the question that I want you to learn how to ask is not, why did this happen to Uzzah? The question that I want you to ask is, why are you alive? Why am I alive? That is the real question. Uzzah did not receive mercy. He also did not receive injustice. Uzzah got justice. That's what Uzzah got. Uzzah received justice. We have grown so accustomed to mercy that we are shocked when God expresses justice. We actually should so understand God's justice that we are shocked when God shows us mercy. That's the mind renewal I want to encourage all of you to pursue. I used to be shocked that God showed his justice. Now more than ever, and I have a long ways to go, I am shocked and amazed that God has shown me mercy. What was Uzzah's sin? Let me try to describe it. When God formed the priesthood, Special commands were given concerning the use and the function of the tabernacle and the articles therein. There was a special family branch of the Levites called the Kohathites, whose specialized task it was to take care of the ark. Look at Numbers chapter 4 with me, if you would. Numbers chapter 4. The tabernacle, the tent of meeting, was mobile. The children of Israel moved, and when they moved, as God led them, they carried it with them. God gave specific details how the Ark of the Covenant was to be handled. And in Numbers chapter 4, verse 4, we read this. This is the work of the Kohathites in the tent of meeting, the care of the most holy things. When the camp is to move, Aaron and his sons are to go in, take down the shielding curtain, cover the ark of the testimony with it. Then they are to cover this with hides of sea cows, spread a cloth of solid blue over that, and put the poles in place. Look at verse 15. Numbers 4:15. After Aaron and his sons have finished covering the holy furnishings and all the holy articles, and when the camp is ready to move, the Kohathites are to come to do the carrying. But they must not touch the holy things, or they will die. The Kohathites are to carry those things that are in the tent of meeting. Look at verse 17. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, see that the Kohathite tribal clans are not cut off from the Levites, so that they may live and not die when they come near the most holy things. Do this for them. Aaron and his sons are to go into the sanctuary and assign to each man his work and what he is to carry. But the Kohathites must not go in to look at the holy things, even for a moment, or they will what? They will die. Uzzah was a Kohathite, and Uzzah knew what his job was. He had been trained thoroughly, and he understood that to touch the ark was a capital offense. No circumstance, no exception. When it came to the ark, you were not to touch it. You'll notice God is meticulous about saying they are to carry it. There were gold rings on the side of the ark. There were poles that were to be put in the ark. And as those long poles were inserted, then the ark could be carried in a way where it didn't need to be touched. Question: whose idea was it to put it on an ox cart? You'll not find any instructions about an ox cart. As a matter of fact, what you'll find is that the Philistines, God's enemies, took the ark on an ox cart. And here we have the people of God bringing it back on an ox cart. That was not acceptable to the Holy One of Israel. Also we read, they aren't to be looking at it. It's to be covered. It's not covered. It's on an ox cart. It's open for all to see. They were looking at it. Uzzah was forbidden to touch. He was forbidden to look, but he touched anyway. And I want you to see this. It was justice. It was not cruel. It was not harsh. It was not the reaction of a God who just lost his temper. It's not the reaction of a God who was struggling with all the celebration. It was the just reaction of a holy God for a presumptuous, arrogant act on Uzzah's part. See, Uzzah made an assumption that he shouldn't have made, and that's this. Uzzah assumed that his hand was less polluted than the earth upon which the cart or the ark would have fallen upon. He assumed wrong. God would have had no problem with that ark falling on the dirt, because the dirt isn't in rebellion to him. But God had no choice when something which is in rebellion to him came into contact with his holy presence, except to execute him. God didn't want his throne touched by someone who was in rebellion to him. When you understand that, you realize that Uzzah was not innocent. He wasn't punished without warning, and he violated divine law. Do you know what was taking place here? As the ark was being restored, there was an informality among God's people that wasn't blessing the holy God. Worship was about ready to be reestablished, and God did not want a precedent set when it came to how the Ark of the Covenant, the focus of His presence, was to be handled. He decisively checked it. I would say so. Matter of fact, look at 1 Chronicles 15 with me, and you'll see that in the future, it became very clear to David that things were going to be done God's way. This was a theocracy. David asked, how can I bring the Ark of God back? God was going to help him to understand how he could bring the Ark of God back. Exodus 15, 1 and 2. After David had constructed buildings for himself in the city of David, he prepared a place for the Ark of God and pitched a tent for it. And then David said, no one but the Levites may carry the Ark of God. David has done his homework now, because the Lord chose them to carry the Ark of the Lord and to minister before Him forever. Drop down to verse 13. It was because you, the Levites, did not bring it up the first time that the Lord our God broke out in anger against us. We did not inquire of Him how to do it in the prescribed way. So the priests and the Levites consecrated themselves in order to bring up the Ark of the Lord, the God of Israel, and the Levites carried the Ark of God with poles on their shoulders, as Moses had commanded, in accordance with the word of the Lord. In verse 16, it happens again. He told the leaders of the Levites to appoint their brothers as singer, to sing joyful songs accompanied by musical instruments, and everybody is about ready to have the same celebration they had before. They do not carry the ark back in silence. It's clear to them God wasn't trying to stop their celebrating, but He was trying to bring the right reverence and awe and obedience to their celebrating. If we are offended when we read about Uzzah, and I have been offended, I've read through that and struggled. I trust I've shared my struggle with you. Don't understand it, Lord. Reflex action. But as I've seen further, it wasn't just a reflex action. He clearly, presumptuously, arrogantly violated divine law, and there was an informality about the way he was relating to the ark that was totally unacceptable. It was just, it was right, it was the holy thing to do for God to execute him. If we are offended by God's justice, then it is a sign that we don't understand His holiness, we don't understand His justice, we don't understand His wrath, we don't understand His grace. If you want to understand what grace is all about, if you want to understand what holiness is all about, you must understand what justice is all about. Justice is something that we must study. God is just. Uzzah is not an example of divine mercy. Not at all. And what I'm saying to you is that it's too easy for us to take mercy for granted. Let me read to you something from Sproul's book where he's talking about this. This is amazing. I don't know how many years he's taught seminary, but it's been a number of years. And he said this, he said, I've had countless students ask me why God doesn't save everybody. Only once, he said, did a student come to me and say, there is something I just can't figure out. Why did God redeem me? That's tragic. That's the overwhelming majority of his students. We are not really surprised that God has redeemed us. Somewhere deep inside in the secret chambers of our hearts, we harbor the notion that God owes us His mercy. Heaven would not quite be the same if we were excluded from it. We know that we are sinners, but we are surely not as bad as we could be. There are enough redeeming features to our personalities that if God is really just, He will include us in salvation. What amazes us, he says, is justice, not grace. Now, if that's you, don't be condemned. You can't work this up, but you can change. If you are more amazed at justice than you are at grace, I hope to set in motion something that next year at this time you are more amazed at grace than you are at justice. We soon forget, listen, we soon forget that with our first sin, we have forfeited all rights to the gift of life. God owes me nothing. I owe Him everything. Folks, the very first time you sinned, the very first time I sinned, God could have, God should have, it would have been just to kill you. If you are bothered by that, good. I want to stir you up to seek the Word of God yourself, to come to a place where you recognize the fact that you are even breathing tonight is the mercy of Almighty God. He does not owe us mercy. The only thing He owes us is judgment. Now here is the mind blower. When you understand His holiness, you're no longer saying, how could God do this to Uzzah? No. When you understand His holiness, you're sitting there saying, why hasn't God done that to me? That's what I say. Why, Lord? Why haven't you executed me? Why haven't you erased my rebellious presence from the presence of this earth? Why? That's the only question I want to know. Why are you merciful? Why, instead of killing me, did you kill your son? There isn't anybody in this room who can answer that. Nobody can. God doesn't explain it. He just says, CJ, I love you. And the more I understand His holiness, the more I say, I can't believe that you do this. I deserve to die. I was a rebel. I hated your guts. I opposed everything you stood for. I rejected your authority. I exalted my judgment above yours. I charged you. I cursed you. I used your name as a curse word every day for so long. Yet what was your response? You could have killed me. You should have. No human leader would put up with that. God not only put up with it, He said, CJ, you deserve to die. Jesus is going to die in your place. Folks, I just become unraveled. All the buttons burst. Everything inside just comes undone. It's only going to be one body in heaven with scars on it. Alan read tonight about how our bodies will be transformed. Everybody's body will be transformed. Be something to look forward to for most of us. It's going to be one body that is still going to have prints in the wrists. Aren't you looking forward to going up to that body and touching those wrists? I can't wait to do that. I can't wait to walk up to Jesus, have Him stretch out His hands toward me. I can't wait to put my finger in those scars and break. I can't wait to look at His side. I can't wait to kiss His feet. I can't wait because I don't understand why He did it. I've done things far worse than Uzzah, in my opinion. And yet I'm alive. I don't understand that. God doesn't explain it. He just says, I will be merciful to whom I will be merciful. As time goes by, let's be people who grow in our understanding of the amazing grace of God. He didn't owe us anything but judgment. And instead, He gave us mercy.